This is the 50th episode of the Gray Transforms podcast, and I am feeling yoked. This platform is moving, momentum is picking up. We are surfing, we are together moving humanity forward. So remember to subscribe, share, comment below. Let me know what you're thinking about the podcast. Let me know what you're thinking about the conversation. Leave a thumbs up, share it with people. This conversation is with Coach Austin Walker, and he focuses his men's work around Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC. He focuses his men's work on this population, this group of people that really need the service, that really need the opportunity, just as we all do. We all need these opportunities to be in productive, introspective spaces where we can work on our stuff with people that can empathize with the ways that we see the world. So important. It's so powerful. I am feeling yoked that I get to share this conversation for episode 50 of the Gray Transforms podcast. Enjoy.
There's 7 billion people in the world. Not everyone's going to get this.
Great morning, great afternoon, great evening, wherever this conversation finds you. I am Travis Gray. This is Gray Transforms, and today we are blessed to be transforming with another great guest, Coach Austin Walker. Austin is a top-tier men's coach, and we get to talk about masculinity, what it means to be a man. I'm a man, so I look forward to having this conversation. Austin, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great, especially after that enthusiastic introduction. So thank you for having me into this space. And yeah, eager to talk about masculinity, men's work, why this matters. Juicy conversation.
Absolutely. Right away, my thoughts are that there's such a stigma around men's work. But before we go into that, I would like to know, how did you get started in men's coaching? Where did this begin for you?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. I don't know if there's a short way to it. As I started in my coaching journey, I noticed that I was more connected to men, specifically men of color. I began to start as a generalist, and then I began to niche in who are the problems that I'm solving for? Who am I most connecting with and relating to in terms of how I want to serve? It became men of color. So generally it's men's work, but I generally focus with men of color.
Yeah.
The scenic route would be, when I graduated college, the first thought that crossed my mind was, how do I make as much money as possible? Right? And look, nothing wrong with that thought. Money is a useful tool in our world today. However, what was missing from that for me was, what am I here to do? How is it that I want to generate and create money in abundance for myself? I was so singularly focused on doing this thing, a lot influenced by the values, the family that I experienced that prioritized money. Came from definitely a money scarce household. And so for 10 years, I was in government contracting. I was in technology, sales, consulting, and advisory. And the long and short of it was I had built a life that was reflection of what other people expected of me. And by other people, I mean family, I mean like society, what could be seen as normal for my identity. And it wasn't really connected to what I wanted, which is a pretty confusing feeling when I've spent so much time trying to create this in my life. So that was the first time I really, really got internal to look at, what am I here to do? And so that was my entry into the wellness space, where I started working with a therapist for the first time, which was great because at that time I was very closed and I wasn't even honest with myself, let alone anybody else. So it was the first space where I took my thoughts and created them in spoken word, which was really powerful. And then as I got introduced to coaching, those words and thoughts that I was starting to put out there, it really started to look at, well, what do I want to do with this? How do I want to organize and architect this? Really, the great gift that coaching gave to me that's also reflected in how I support people was that I looked at myself as very fixed before coaching. In other words, I'm Austin. This is my personality. This is how I've learned to be in the world. If X stimuli crosses the road, I'm going to respond because I'm Austin. As opposed to really understanding there is a choice in every way in how we respond. And kind of tying to men's work, part of this opportunity we have is to claiming that choice. and the responsibility of those choices. And so it really creates this platform. Wow, I get to actually be whatever it is that I choose. And part of my journey as I've deepened into myself and understanding who I am as a man has given me more clarity. And it's one of the things that I also serve and support other men to be able to get more clear on themselves. What does it mean to be them? And then what are they here to do? Which I think are two of the most fundamental questions. So there's the long about way, right? A lot of my own journey really influences a lot of the work that I do now. Even if you talk about probably the top three things that I'm working on with men is killing limiting beliefs, raising awareness to unawareness, right? And curbing avoidant behaviors. I was a big check mark and am still a check mark on those three areas. And so my own journey for closing my blind spots, taking responsibility for that, and then what that's allowed me to do has been a big catalyst for how I serve.
Yeah, wow. Beautiful articulation. I love the scenic route. I love that you took the time to participate in the co-creation of your own masculinity, what it meant to be a man, or just this form that you are taking on in your life. You really were exercising your own agency in that creative process. What it is to be Austin, what it is to be Austin Walker, now Coach Austin Walker. So it's really wonderful. All of those three areas that you just named: killing limiting beliefs, bringing awareness to unawareness. What was the third one?
Curbing avoidance.
Curving avoidance. Yeah, I like that a lot. So that's funny that I forgot that one. Wonder what that's about. Huh? So I like those three areas. I think that men are going to be very blessed to be able to work with you. So that's really amazing. When did you see the therapist for the first time? How old were you?
I was 30 years old, and that was
30
in
years.
summer of 2019.
Wow, wow. 30 years old. It's funny how like people can like come into therapy at different stages of their lives. The first time I saw a therapist, I sought out a therapist myself, and I was 17. I was on probation. I had an ankle bracelet. I was telling my mom, "Hey, I think I need therapy. I would really like to see somebody to help me with what's going on here."
Well,
I didn't
honoring
have
your foresight for even going to your mom and saying, "Hey, I think I need therapy." That's really uncommon,
right.
particularly for men.
I knew that I don't have a male figure in my life, and I need some extra something. I don't know what it is here, but I'm getting in trouble. I'm obviously like it was clear to me that I'm troubled. Somebody help me. So I did seek therapy. At first, I didn't find a good therapist. It took a couple of rounds to find the right relationship, and then I found one that was really great. It's interesting, like at what ages and the different things that bring somebody into therapy. I think that there is generally a stigma men in doing men's work, facilitating men's work. Not only men, there's women that do some men's work as well, but I generally see that there's a conversation about the stigma, about this idea that people are avoiding. They're sort of avoidant of getting into a space where they can do the work. What is your sense of that stigma? I think since you're focused on people of color, the Black community as well, that stigma is spoken about, observed in the Black community quite a bit as well. So what is your sense of that stigma? What is causing this avoidance to the work?
Yeah, well, juicy question, and there's layers to it. So I'll start out wide, and then we'll go to get more specific.
Sure.
So generally, it feels like with a lot of wellness modalities, and again, I'm generalizing here, but for a lot of men, therapy, coaching, consulting, mentorship, sponsorship may seem like this element of resisting help and support in some way. And I'd say particularly with therapy or wellness modalities like coaching. And I think that's starting to shift now where people are being more open to that. But previously I've worked and encountered a lot of men who are like, wait, why would I go see a therapist? I'm not crazy. Like that's a common response, which obviously couldn't be further from the truth. So it feels like there's really this misorientation for what these different modalities are and how men use them. So, it goes to a point that I even referenced earlier that felt true in my story and maybe parts of yours. It's hard to normalize anything that isn't modeled within your community.
Hmm.
So as I was growing up, I didn't know any men in my life that were engaged in therapy, any of my men that were coaches, any of my men that did somatic practices. So it's like, how was that supposed to be normal for me in any capacity? And so it really took me like my own seeking out, because I was feeling something that was so abnormal for me. I was feeling depressed, and I was like, this is very abnormal. So I'm going to dive into that. As we get more specific, I think there is disempowered stories or stigmas around some of these modalities. And I think when you look into Black and brown communities, especially, I think they are only heightened within those communities because there are less people who model what it looks like to be secure, what it looks like to be healthy, what it looks like to be willing to ask and empower support. Oftentimes there can be a story for a lot of men that I've seen that they have trust issues, particularly if you look at a lot of the wellness space is generally white normative. So when you're asking men of color to go get support in more white normative spaces, not to say that certainly it can't be done, but there are other barriers there. A big part of my work and what I'm trying to create, is particularly through my communities, is to normalize these modalities, right? Men's groups are spaces, safe spaces where men can share and be authentically expressed. Coaching is a powerful space where you get to have your patterns and your way of being mirrored back to you so you can distinguish and look at it. Therapy is a space where you get more connected with your emotions. You get to process and feel through with things. And so if you tie all of this back to, right, the avoidance that I work with in a lot of men, a lot of men, and I would say particularly avoidance, and I would kind of consider myself as more on the avoidant side than rather the anxious. And again, super generalization there, but for conversation purposes, is we avoid feeling uncomfortable feelings. Even just coming off of a recent men's experience I had, one of the big tenets that was talked about there is really the only way to work through something is to feel through something. When you actually don't allow yourself to feel, and it's generally more of the negative feelings, the anger, the anguish, the grief, the sorrow, the disappointment, the despair, you stay stuck in that place, right? Your body, the neural patterns in your mind. Like, there's a lot of studies that show when we have these negative events, it sticks with us and we start relating to ourselves in that way until we're in spaces where we can process and work through it. So whether that's coaching, therapy, mentorship, men's groups, there's a lot of different ways around it. And so it really takes an awareness of, hey, there's something that I'm avoiding. There's something that I have some fear or apprehension around. And because of that, it's not allowing me to break through or to be something different. And especially if I know that I have an intention to be something better, I have an intention to be more trusting in my relationship. I have an intention to be more forgiving with myself or with my family, then it's going to be required to have to normalize being uncomfortable and facing uncomfortable emotions, expanding your capacity to be with these type of emotions in order really to be the truest and most expressed version of yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that the example of men going to therapy is just, you don't see it enough to normalize this experience of going to therapy. It's like there's not enough men in the community to give permission to other men to do the work. You're setting the example, doing those things gives others permission to rise to the same frequency of that. It does seem like in society, in culture, it seems like this is a growing opportunity that more men are accepting, or it does seem like society is more accepting of people that are doing more of the personal work through coaching or therapy or what have you, doing the personal work on themselves. It does seem like that is growing. There's also this pressure, I think, that as men, as you go wide and more narrow, there's culturally relevant reasons for this pressure to be even heavier on maybe a man of color or things like this. But there's just like this pressure for a man to be pristine, to just like be so spot on in every way. There's no acceptance for mistakes. There's like this man needs to lead the way at the snap of fingers. That, you know, that when the alarm sounds, every man in the room needs to know exactly what to do in bringing the solution to that problem, to that emergency situation. So that is like further metaphored and layered onto the lives of men, even at a young age in among your peers and things like this. You're expected to already have all of these answers and be like, oh man, I've shown up as a perfectly, I'm at the my final form. I'm already here, my final form. But it does need more examples of people giving permission to others that form can continue to grow and evolve and can continue to be worked on. And you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be a matter of mental dysfunction. Of course, if you have some mental disorders and there's things to work on there, definitely get that worked on. But if you're really a high level person, a top tier individual, if you are that, you're just naturally, you're going to seek more of the opportunities to grow and strengthen your skills, your talents, and what have you, so that you can have a better impact, a rippling effect on the men around you.
Well, that would be the hope, right?
Yeah.
If you are this high performing person, that inherently that comes with some element of personal responsibility. And what personal responsibility is understanding, like, where are my edges? Where are my blind spots? Where are the areas where there's an opportunity for me to expand my capacity, expand my awareness, expand my skill sets, expand my healing? How safe am I? So, I mean, that's the ideal. But what I would offer in around that is that there's a distance powered story that feels true around a lot of men, is this idea that you said it earlier. My value is dictated by how I perform and how I show up. So I have to have the answers. I have to make the money. I've got to be able to do all of the things. And if I can't, I take that very poorly. And so we get to look at like how men cope when they don't do that. But I think the bigger element of that is within that story, there seems to be this element of, but I got to do it on my own. I can't ask for help. Asking for help is a sign of weakness. So when you talk about these barriers that may exist in between getting the support, it's very uncommon for a man that I generally, even in 2025, to be like, oh yeah, I'm in therapy. Right. Or, oh, hey, yeah, I know I have this problem with, right, avoidance. I notice that I tend to be dysregulated at times and it makes me untrustable in my relationship. Even just have the clarity around that to not make it mean something about them, but just to be conscious and aware that this is a thing to work on. Well, the big challenge is if like you don't know that you're actually having these things and that they're the issue that they are, and that you don't know, or that there are these different outlets that you can go to get supported on.
Bringing that awareness to the unconscious, like there is a lot of unconscious material, outside perspectives to do the mirroring, and so that you can see some of those unconscious parts. Otherwise you might never see those unconscious parts. I think that there's maybe a meta story inside of that story that you're speaking of around failure. That meta story is that, like, if you make a mistake, you try to do this on your own, you're expected to do it on, or be able to do it on your own and not need assistance from others maybe. But then also that if you make a mistake, that is absolute failure. But mistakes are a part of, success, and failing forward is a part of growing, and it's a part of moving forward. And so it's like there's like a dysfunction in that story of failure, of what it means to fail. Maybe social media is even emphasizing, the kind of problems that we have in the age of information. Maybe it sort of inherently emphasizes that kind of that problematic meta story of failure, because we only see the success of people's lives. We only see people having a grand old time every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to that. I mean, to your latter point, we do live in the social media area where there is this perception of I show only my light, but I don't show really my shadow. I don't show the rough edges part of me. And so, right, that goes into these stories and like these personas that we create of ourselves that may not be truly reflective of where we're at. So I think what you're pointing to is definitely a culprit in that can lead to this incongruency.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this idea that like the 6'6" thing, like a man needs to be, I don't believe this. I don't believe that a man needs to be 6 feet tall, make six figures. What do you think makes a man be a man? What is it that makes a man?
Well, it's definitely not how much money you make or how tall you are. I mean, even your height. I mean, how wild is that? That's something that you have zero control over, right? I mean, that's genetics and DNA. So for me, what makes a man is the depth of his character, his integrity. Is he aligned with who he says that he is? And that's not just the words that he says. What are his values? Are that reflected in how he shows up? What is his constitution? What are the standards and principles that this man lives by? If you're not clear around what your values, what your principles, what your standard, essentially what your constitution are, that's hard to be like for me to say, oh, that's a really clear, reliable man. And so, within that, you get to look and choose what's important to me. Generally, for a lot of men, being able to provide in some capacity. You don't need to make six figures in all cases to be able to provide. Right. And so it also goes down to this level of consciousness and awareness. If you may have a wife and a kid and you're saying what I need to be able to provide is $60,000 a year. So am I choosing to live in a space and be able to provide or choose an occupation that provides sufficient enough to what my specific environment needs? So it feels like the trap to fall into. And this even goes into this performance element that you mentioned earlier with a lot of men is saying six figures is the standard. That's good. So we start creating these labels. So I have to make six figures, 6+ figures. I've got to be this tall. I've got to be able to have sex for this long. I've got to be able to have X, Y, Z. And it's like, wait. You got to claim that for yourself. What do these things mean for you? And so if you haven't chosen these things, then they're going to be chosen by something that is external. And so I think what makes a grounded man is, again, how clear he is of who he is and what he's here to do. And of course, there are different pillars and structures under those, but I think it really comes down to those two things. And if you're clear on that, you're going to be a very clear, crisp, reliable, and trustable man.
I love the emphasis of bringing the agency back into it. What you are choosing is so valuable that if you do not make a choice, if you do not have a depth of character or challenging yourself to create more depth in your character and learn to articulate some of these things, then it's going to be chosen outside of you. I see in the background you have a bookshelf. I love books. I have my bookshelf as well. A lot of the men that I have worked with, I have tended to need to re-emphasize the value of reading and writing. These are really basic things. When I heard you speak about these different qualities of a man, the integrity, how are their actions matching their words, their integrity, their character, their constitution, all of these things, what are their values? How is that articulated? Is that articulated anywhere in your life? Or have you ever written that down? Even if you, I mean, at minimum, put words to it, spoke it out loud at minimum, but such a value in reading and writing. And a lot of these things, sometimes I get a little bit tripped up on this idea that this is just a man thing, or a woman thing. And I don't like some of that dichotomy that happens. There's kind of a dysfunctional conversation that's happening there. And so a lot of these things are just applicable to either gender, either sex, but it's so curious, like it's so nonsensical that we have sort of forgotten reading and writing. Have there been some books that have been really influential in you exploring more depth of character for yourself?
Yeah, two come to mind, and these are my two favorite men's books. The first one is Way of the Superior Man by David Data.
David Data.
Oh, I love that. And, I only got introduced to that, actually, both these books within the last 2.5 years or so. And it's really informed a lot of my teachings, my framework around what it means to be a grounded, responsible, masculine leader. And so I love how he brings in the dynamics of really like what is masculine energy and what is feminine energy, because these aren't genders, right? They're different characteristics. Like I am both masculine and feminine, just as all people are both. And based off of your gender, you might be more favored to one particular paradigm here. And I love the principles that he outlines on really like, this is actually what it means to be masculine, right? This is how the masculine then engages with the feminine. And I think the big thing that I get from that is really constitution, which from this idea of what it means to be masculine, I didn't have a whole lot of that. And then one of his proteges, John Wineland, this is the second book, From the Core, which takes a lot of the works from David Data around what is masculinity. And his take is more focused on the dynamic between polarity, the polarity between the masculine and feminine. What does it mean to be trustable? What does it mean to be clear? How do you engage really safely and effectively and productively with the feminine, whether that's in yourselves or whether that's in the feminine and the gender? And so those two books have particularly been wildly influential for me. And I'd say those are probably the top two. If I had another one, right when I first got into coaching, it's Getting Real. And the author's escaping my mind at this particular moment. We can put that in the show notes. But it was this idea of really looking and being deeply honest and curious with yourself. So starting really this internal excavation of, why do you do what you do? Why do you believe what you believe? What is important to you? Where are you being honest with yourself? Where are you not? And a lot of these questions feel and sound really simple when you share them out, but can be really profound when you start pulling the thread on these, as you start to really put this framing and picture together to, what does it mean to be me?
Yeah. What does it mean to actually start asking yourself those questions?
Okay.
You know, they can be very obvious questions or easy questions to ask until you start asking yourself those questions and trying to come up with those answers. John Wineland has a lot of great work, the feminine essence and the masculine essence. We have both of those things. The Way of the Superior Man, such a phenomenal book. I've given it out to people before. It's just it just speaks on the conversation of having both of those essences, both of those principal qualities inside yourself, masculinity and femininity, so well. It's really, really phenomenal. So those are great book suggestions for people. I understand that you just got done with a retreat with John Wineland. How did that go for you?
It was incredible. And thanks for asking. Yes, I just came back 2 days ago from a 5-day immersion within Death Valley. And it's a part of his embodied masculine leadership
That was
training.
hot, huh?
It was hot. It was hot. Not as hot as it is in July, but it was pretty hot. And there's a cohort of about 80 of us that are in a 6-month program. And a part of this particular program, it really goes through this journey of different tenets of really core masculinity. Our first month was focused on our relationship to attachment. How attached are we to certain things? And one of the great masculine gifts is to release expectation and attachment and be with what is, right? Layer number 2 was really focused on this depth of integrity. And what does it mean to be in alignment with who you say that you are? 3, this element, month 3, this connection to truth. And when we're able to be honest about what is for us, how energy and life-giving that is. So just to give a scope of what this work was. And so this first immersion was really a combination of that. It was a deeply meticulously held space. And, he said something that really stuck with me as a man who leads retreats itself. The more meticulous that a space is constructed, the deeper that it can go. And so from how it was organized, from even the rituals, the artifacts that were brought into the space that made it a really safe container to do some really deep, edgy work, was really powerful. And so to honor the experience, what I will share about it was a place for men in a meticulously held container to really go deep and very deeply feel feelings that they've been avoiding. One of his big principles is you're not going to be able to process through anything if you actually don't allow yourself to feel it. It's blocked energy in your pipes. And so when you actually release that, you can create something new versus not being reliant on old patterns, old way of relying and coping with feelings that we've been avoiding. So it was really powerful for me. I had some personal breakthroughs around my relationship with anguish and how that's largely an emotion that I hadn't really dealt with, that's connected to one of my core wounds, which is the abandonment from my mother and how that's shown in my life, which has been reflected in all of my romantic relationships to date and even my own personal avoidance. And, through that, I'm feeling really energetically open and clear as I've been able to work through and process that. One other thing that I'll share that I think is a real signature of his work, he talks about this ability to be able to practice. And a lot of what he practices is enhancing our awareness and consciousness is through the breath. So he loves to say, man with the deepest breath has the deepest access to consciousness. And, breath work is kind of funny because I'm on a 75-day streak right now of a consistent 20-minute breathwork sadhana, which is a Kundalini breathwork practice that I've been engaging in. And it's the most
75 days.
75 days. And I
Nice.
mentioned that specifically because this
Congrats.
is the most consistent I've ever been with breathwork. And how it was framed in this program is, and why I like this so much is, you have to be able to be willing to do something every day as almost a sacrifice to this experience of man that you say you're committed to being. Everybody wants to be successful. Everyone wants to be grounded. Everyone wants to be healthy. But it's also, there's a difference between saying those things and doing something every day that's an offering to that. And so 2 parts there is just how both grounded and energized, the paradoxical nature I feel after engaging in that. And it was a big part of the immersion of expanding practice, of how much more calm and clear and grounded I feel when I'm connected to my breath, how much more trustable that makes me, how much more clear and focused I am in really the servicing of my mission through practice. And it's been something that's been really reflected further so as I've been engaging these different modalities and my coaching practice and my men's groups and our retreats. And I don't think not nearly enough men, but you could say people, really practice regulating and retraining their nervous systems through intentional breath work.
Yeah.
So overall, it was a really powerful experience. I'm taking a lot from it. And again, it's very uncommon to be in a container where you have other men who are really committed to expanding themselves, to have the courage to face their demons. That shit ain't easy, right? It's
Yeah.
very confronting.
And so amazing to be doing that in a group of 80 men, 100 men. So many people watching the podcast right now, men that I've worked with, they've never had an experience quite like that, to be around 80 other people or of other men that are actually showing up for themselves in this way to do this work. It's really profound. Such an amazing experience that I hope other men get an opportunity to experience. I think that it just comes down to, in tribal times, you would have been able to only be around the group of leadership that is the masculine leadership in the small pocket communities, and so that you can learn the ways of being a man for the community as it moves forward, things like that. It's all as above so below. There's all these dichotomies and mirroring metaphoric pieces of wisdom and insight that you can get from things like this. Meticulously designing this container for these 80 men to dive deep into that. And how meticulously could you design your own life or your own relationship? If you're having some challenges in your relationship, in your marriage, or things like this, how meticulously have you been able to co-create that container with your wife, with your partner in that container, and meticulously just giving great detail and articulation to the details of how you want these things to go. Preparing for an emergency before the emergency happens, preparing for conflict before conflict happens. It is quite the thing to try to learn how to deal with conflict inside of a conflict, or inside of an emergency. How do we deal with this? How well have you? It goes back to the previous element of just how deeply articulating are you in your designing of the kind of life that you want, and the family that you want.
I think that's a beautiful point. I'm really glad you brought that into the conversation. So thank you. If you look at even just high level masculine, one of the great gifts is providing structure, right? And then feminine essentially is the energy that goes into structure. So a really simple example could be, if we had a glass of water, the glass would be the masculine. It holds the water. If the structure isn't there, there's nowhere for the water to be held or contained. You can't drink it. Like it's wet. It's all over you. So it's like, it's the same substance, but it needs to be held and contained. So when you look at that, one of the things when we're tapping into masculine energy is how much ownership am I taking around structure, which could be plan, which could be details. You mentioned in my relationship, how much am I being responsible for leading the conversations of around how we're doing in our relationship? Does my partner know what the specific structure is going to be? And each man gets to determine what level of rigor is needed for what they want. But it's this looking of, am I being master of time and space? And that's what I relate to when I think of meticulous structure. So when you bring this into like the retreats, it is the artifacts that were there. It was the sage. It was the blessing of each man as they came in. It was all of the zafus and the zabutons were all pointing a certain way. The blankets were all folded, facing a specific direction. The lighting, the structures, every detail has an intention. There is nothing that doesn't have a specific purpose. And because the structure is set that way, it's also setting a standard for the men that are entering that space that they're going to uphold a standard that reflects the structure. And that's how it's led. So I love where you're looking at there. And I hope that offers to be able to provide some examples and around it. And then that's what each person gets to look at. Well, how structured am with myself? And you can take this to any facet of my life. Am I bringing meticulous structure to my finances? Am I bringing meticulous structure to my health, to my diet, to my sleep, to my emotional connection, to my personal growth, to my career? And those are all opportunities to own, again, should you claim it.
Yeah, so much of our life is left with no intention. It's left with, what should I do today? Well, it's already today, so let's try to get that straightened out for tomorrow. If you didn't know what you were going to do today, when it got to today, let's try to prepare a little bit better for tomorrow. As it related to relationships, the kinds of things the details that you mentioned of the meticulous structure of this retreat, it's like your family life. Is there, what are the traditions? What are the habits? What are the ways that you are greeting your partner at the door? What are the ways that you're taking care of dinner and things like this? It's like these patterns and habits, they can all be given some intention, but any of the areas of our life that kind of goes out the window, or it just kind of like falls apart, the areas of our lives that are dysfunctional, those are the areas that are lacking intention. They are lacking a meticulous structure. They're lacking a healthy container to be fed into and held in. They're not being held with care. And so there's something that we need to do there. We live in a beautiful human existence that it gets to show itself. It gets to show itself to you through conflict and dysfunction. It gets to show you, this is where I need to, tie up those loose ends. At least it doesn't end up like under the bed. It always comes out from under the bed. Maybe not in great ways, maybe not in ways that you want them to come out, but it's going to reveal itself eventually. And it's just to shine forth to you that, this is an opportunity. This is an area where I can build the container, the healthy container that we need as I lead us or my life, maybe as a single person or in relationship, how I can lead our lives or my life in the direction that we're aiming to go.
I love that. And I'll give you a very personal example in around that, particularly in relationship. So one of the things for context, I date an absolute goddess. Her name is Taylor, and she is an attachment therapist. And she has been so vital into the up leveling really of me as a man based off of the standard that she's shown. And it's been really beautiful, as this might be a sub bar. I don't actually think we can be the truest expression of ourselves as masculine without the mirroring and the challenge of the feminine. Like there's only so far that we can get on our own. There's another cap that's available through like relationally. And so some of our rituals that we've created together, we've got what's called a weekly wind up, which is essentially an hour strategy meeting on Sunday where we go and we plan for the meet. What is this week going to demand of us? Where are we going to have our one-on-one time? What do we need to be accounting for? So that's an example of, right, some of this meticulous structure that has been developed. but an area as we don't live together yet, but that's coming shortly. And one of the things that we're looking at right now, well, what is our nighttime routine? And full transparency, that's been an area that I haven't had much consciousness around. And, as an individual, when I lie my head down in bed, I'm ready to go to bed. And then I'm getting, some feedback from my partners like, wait, I'm here too, right? Right. Like, so what is actually our nighttime ritual? How do we create something that honors each other? So I'll even own that's been something that I'm actively going through right now. I've had this very particular way in which I'm doing things. But now as I'm sharing that with somebody else, I've made some assumptions based off of kind of what I know. So it's been a reflection of, oh, this is an area where I have a lack of awareness, or I haven't been conscious of what this means for us. And now then with that, I get to choose and co-create that with her. What is this going to be? How am I being considerate of what my partner's needs while also being mindful of what I need? And so this is like a very practical example of what this looks like and why we constantly have to be looking, because we all have edges. We all have blind spots. It's not like there's even the most intentional service mission driven man may have areas where he's not having his presence fully felt because there isn't something or there's something in his blind spot that he's not aware of. And I'll speak in my relationship, when I don't do that, it makes me less trustable because my partner doesn't feel that I've got her. Now my partner has to tap into the masculine to try and counteract this lack of structure. And then she's building it. And so, right, the polarity can be off. That's an opportunity. And there's many of them in my life and the men that I work with.
Both that masculine and femininity, it exists in both of us. How magical. I'm so, just happy for you to have such an amazing woman in your life, because how beautiful is it that that the quality of the water begins to transform the container. That is magic right there, that the quality of that water, like, choose your water carefully, because man, the quality of the water could transform that container. It could rust it. It could, if it wasn't great quality water, maybe that is rusting it, causing dysfunction of different metaphorical symbolism. But if you get the right matching, it's a copper container or what have you. But the idea that the liquid inside of that container can magically transform each other is so beautiful. So in relationship, you get to be metaphorically, you get to be this liquid or this substance that is transforming the container of the other person. You get to be that, and vice versa. That's why I wanted to speak on this again, this both and within each other, this masculine and feminine presence, because sometimes you are the water in the container, in the open arms, the held arms of your loved one, of your partner, of the relationship as a container in itself. It's really beautiful. I wanted to, something that has come to mind in relationship, laying in bed at the end of the evening, is like these positions of sleep. And I've thought about this, like, in great detail, of like, when I'm sleeping by myself, I have a real particular method, and then I go to sleep. Sleep is so important to get the most recovery that we can. We're busy people and trying to do the best we can in our waking life. Our sleep is so important. So now when you have a partner there, there's a challenge. There's a challenge to be overcome. There's a challenge to be intentional about, because if that partner is like moves a lot in their sleep, or for these different things. So how do you find the best position for that is really fascinating to me. How can we be in such a position that we're both keeping our mouths closed and breathing through our noses through the night, keeping it cool, two bodies together, that's going to be a heightened body temperature, but we know that a cooling bed is going to offer a better quality of sleep. So just an example of all these opportunities to meticulously, intentionally design that co-created space in the different elements of where your relationship reveals those needs to be.
said it perfectly. I mean, I don't have the level of depth around that it seems like you have around sleeping positions specifically. So I really honor that. But my girlfriend and I have been really intentional about the environment. Is it dark? Is it cool? Do we make sure we have our specific sleep technology? I wear an eye mask and earplugs. And when she first started sleeping, she was like, what do you do? But now she's taken on the eye mask as well, because I've noticed that I'm really, really light sensitive. So, right, there's a partnership and around it. Those are things that you get to figure out together.
This is not an ad. I do use an eye mask, or I had been using an eye mask. It's been getting a little bit warmer, so I'm not using the eye mask, but I'm just using it's a beanie that like protects your head from EMFs. Because of Wi-Fi signal on as you are sleeping. While you're sleeping, there's Wi-Fi signal that can be dysfunctional to your sleep. But the beanie, I'm putting it over my eyes, so it's still blocking the light sensitivity when my eyes are closed. But I'm still getting an opportunity to breathe through my nose as well. Have you ever used mouth tape?
I haven't gotten to the mouth tape. A lot of people that I follow are into it, but I haven't dived in yet.
I did it for 3 months, mouth tape, right? Again, not an ad, but I liked their tape for a while. I did it for 3 months, and I never want to be I never want to be dependent on this externality, this now I can't sleep unless I tape my mouth. It's kind of crazy. So I don't want to be dependent on it like that, but for 3 months, about maybe even 6 months, it might have been longer than 3 months, I was doing mouth tape over my mouth while I was sleeping, and it was helping train my body to breathe through the nose during sleep. But I found that you could do that in other ways. You could do it as simply as putting a fist over under your chin in your resting position, or holding you're just like in such a position that you're holding your jaw. Give it some support, or a pillow. If you're hugging a pillow, maybe that can be what gives your jaw the support that it needs to keep the mouth shut, so that you're just sleeping through the nose. So when it comes to partnership, I've thought about this is the first time I'm speaking on this. It's just such great detail, but I've thought about what is the right position if you are spooning with somebody or whatever. How can I get my jaw protected with the shoulder of my lover, maybe, so that I'm still breathing through my nose? And then what is my arm doing to maybe be the support for her jaw? And then she can breathe through her nose. It can be so cool, but I'll do some content around it or something. This masculinity and femininity parallel within all of us, there's kind of these leanings. Maybe you're leaning in the masculine area, or leaning in the feminine. There seems to be some archetypal roles, archetypal truths around men and women. What are your thoughts on this idea? This comes from a conversation that I had with a fellow therapist who is a woman, and she's very into physical fitness. And I tried to have this question on another podcast with a woman about birth, but she had this idea that she was speaking on toxic masculinity a lot. And I was telling her, I don't really think that there is toxic masculinity. I'm challenging the idea that if you are calling masculinity toxic in any form, since we are people that are trying to raise the frequency of femininity and masculinity, then we are not focused on the right things when we are labeling toxic masculinity. But there are toxic behaviors, and those toxic behaviors show up in these different ways. So what is your thoughts on the archetypal nature of the masculine and the distinction between the archetypal nature of the feminine?
Yeah, well, beautiful. A lot there. I'll go from the back front. Actually, sorry, I got like 3 thoughts blitzing my mind there.
Yeah, I kind of said a lot there.
Yeah, no. I love what you said around isn't toxic masculinity or toxic femininity, but there are toxic behaviors. Because if we look at masculinity and femininity, it's on a spectrum. So generally, with anything on the extremes, people tend to maybe have a little bit more abrasion towards, and that where things may fall into toxic behaviors or toxic categories. I look at this notion of toxic masculinity is a misrepresentation or misunderstanding of what masculinity is. Oftentimes people have these stereotypes of what masculine or feminine is. So masculine is uber strong and not connected into emotions. And I wouldn't say that's masculinity at all, right? As we talked about, essentially masculinity is about structure and it's about this pursuit for freedom, right? And whereas feminine is more focused on feeling, feminine is more nurturing. And so again, as humans, we have both of these elements from them. And then so from that, I'm not as familiar with the female archetypes, but I more focus on like the masculine archetypes. If you look at some common ones that right we play with in our men's group and retreats, right? Warrior, king, jester, lover, which all show different textures of a masculine experience. So, right, the king focus on more on leadership and strategy. The warrior, this ferocity and this toughness. The jester, this playful side, right? And then the warrior, jester, lover, and the magician, right? And so it's this element of magic and wonder. So these are all masculine expressions, but they're different textures to them. And so I think there's this idea of archetypes can be really helpful to help you connect to, hey, like what actually feels really true for whatever my baseline is. Some people might be more warrior versus magician or more jester than king. And there's an opportunity, right? Because we have all of them available within us. How can these archetypes give us access to different behaviors that might be more supportive for what the moment that I'm in needs? Many people might kind of default to one lane and they stay in that lane. And I think one of the beautiful expressions of masculine or feminine leadership is the range of your masculinity. A masculinity is not always king. There's times where a king with that doesn't have the jester in him is what is a tyrant. All parts of these are really important expressions of the human experience, I think.
That is really curious. I wonder what I think those archetypes were there's like a famous book that kind of outlines that. And I wonder if there are examples of where the feminine represents those specific ideas. Or I am curious, what are the, maybe for a king, there's queen, but what is the magician that is a woman? What is the lover that is a woman? What is the jester that is a woman? Where can a woman be playful too? There's some great books around like the wilding woman and rewilding women and stuff like that. But that is curious. What are those? What are those? What's the other side of that coin? And I think that that's why relationship is such a transformative container. As we begin to learn more about each other, learn more about the feminine and the masculine is taught through us and our integrity and our words matching our actions.
Mhm.
Then we have this opportunity to rise together. So relationships so beautiful. This conversation has been really awesome. Just lots of depth in different areas. I really enjoy having this conversation with you, Austin. Is there a good place for people to go to follow your content? I know you are I am Coach Austin Walker on Instagram, and great Instagram content. Where are other places that people can go to follow you?
You hit the nail on the head with Instagram. I am Coach Austin Walker, or you can go to my website, www.austinwalkercoaching.com. And I'll plug two things. If any men who are listening, particularly men of color who are open for community, that's one of the big elements of my mission right now is, again, to generate awareness around structures that men, specifically men of color, can engage in for self-actualization to be the men that they were born to be. And so I have two offerings. I have the Man Cave, which is a BIPOC virtual men's group that we lead. We meet every Tuesday and Thursday, and these are intentional conversations centered around being integrous, responsible, and open-hearted men. So again, any of your listeners, that feels true for them, or if there's what we've seen is, particularly for a lot of our female listeners, that will be very powerful referrals for other men to engage into these spaces. Or if you listening to some of this and you're wondering, hey, like, what is my masculine frame? What does it mean to be me? How do I really get clear on who I am and what I'm here to do? It's a big part of what my coaching approach is. And so we look at what are the beliefs that you're empowering? What are those are serving you? What are those not? Where are we avoiding? Where can we curb our unawareness and really support our element of consciousness? Is a way that I'm working with men so they can really step in and serve powerfully. And I'll end with this. I mean, we need more men who are locked in, who are activated, who are really clear with what they're here to do. It impacts them as individuals, it impacts their families, it impacts our community, and it impacts our society. And I firmly believe that men need to lead the way and to set the standard with this so that, right, the feminine feels safe, the feminine feels honored, and really we have harmony. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, Travis.
Yeah, I'm with you, Austin. And I saw something that you said on maybe another podcast or in your Instagram bio as well. Men, show the fuck up, right? So we do need more men to show the fuck up. So I'm with it.
So during my men's rite of passage ceremony, that was the power phrase that I came for myself that's reflective of who I am at my core. My name is Richard Austin Walker, and I'm a man who shows the fuck up. Yeah. Right? I lead with truth and love. And so I share that. We end every gathering of the man cave with show the fuck up and find out as our call to action. And we really come to empower that phrasing, even the explicitive of it, because I think it's really true. I mean, what's possible if you really show up for yourself? I think there's a lot of possibility out there. So you did it beautifully, Travis. Show the fuck up.
I love that so much. That's something for me, is that I'm always showing up to the space. Like, people can get annoyed with me. It's just, I'm always showing up. I'm always going to be there. So I really loved that that insight for you and that rite of passage experience. That's really great. I understand that was with like Jetty Azuma and those guys.
That was with Jetty Azuma, and I did that through Modern Renaissance Man with a few others, Jose Alejandro, and Boy Wycheck. Yeah. Great, powerful.
So those guys are really great. I did with Jetty. I did like a Haka event in 2017. We did this Haka initiation event. It was so good. I've had somebody on the podcast before, Ben the Bridge, has been on the podcast for the Haka. I had somebody that does Haka for life, a New Zealander that does Haka for life. We spoke about one of our beloved brothers there in that Haka retreat actually committed suicide, unfortunately. So it's like we had this conversation about who helps the helper. So really important. Yeah, just it is cool. And it's cool that you got to be a part of that rite of passage. That 4 days, 4 nights thing is really dope. I love what they're doing over there.
Powerful.
Who is this man